Hey, thanks for coming back and hanging out at the Graphically Hip channel. Our channel is for folks who use the BN20 printer and beginners to Illustrator. So we do most of our tutorials on how to use Illustrator and combine it with the BN20 printer. And we do a few little tutorials on the actual production end of using the printer as well. So today's lesson is going to be on how to round the corners of a print so that when you print a smaller sticker or decal, sorry, I'm in Canada, so I say decal. I know many of you are in the US, so you say decal, but it's all the same really. But anyway, talking about rounding corners because when you're printing at smaller scale, the blade on the cutter often ends up ripping really sharp edges. So I'm just going to show you with an example of some text how to do that. So I'm just going to grab my text tool here. That can also be found under Window and then Type. Sorry, it's called Type, not Text, but and then Character. So I'm just going to type some text. Let's say like hustle, for example. And because I'm wanting to make this a little bit fancier, I'm going to update the font to something, I don't know. This is just for fun, so we can use whatever font we want. But just keep in mind that there are fonts that prohibit commercial utilization. So if you're downloading fonts from DaFont or something like that, you want to always make sure you're getting the commercial license with your font and or paying for the font itself if you're going to be reselling. So just for fun, I'm going to pick the Hustle font, or sorry, the Amsterdam font. This is not a font that's licensed for reuse, I don't think. So again, we're just doing this for tutorial purposes. So whenever I do something with a font, I always drag a copy off to the side in case I want to change it later. And I do that by, I guess, so you just grab the initial font that you typed out, drag it, and then I'm using a Mac, so I hold the Alt button. And when I do that, you'll see that the two little arrows on my cursor are two arrows now. If I let go of Alt, there's just the one arrow. So if I add the Alt or Option button, which I think on a PC would be Alt, I think it is Alt on a PC, that means you're making a copy when you see the two arrows. So I just drag that off to the side in case I want to make changes to it later, because right now I'm going to change this into a shape. And I do that by right clicking. Just make sure your font is selected. Right click and say create outlines. Now, if I was just putting a cut line on this black, that would be a problem. And this is why. So this shape would cut out by itself. This shape would cut out by itself. This little shape would cut out by itself. And we don't want that, right? We want just one cut line around the whole thing. So how to fix that is by going to Pathfinder, which in my Illustrator, I have it set up over here, but you might need to go to Window and then Pathfinder. So you just go to Pathfinder and you find this button, which is called Unite. So I just click that, and that just makes this whole darn thing one shape. If you're on a PC, press Control Y. I'm on a Mac, so I'm pressing Command Y, and that will put your design into outline mode where you don't see any color. You just see the shapes and outlines, so you can see now that those weird little shapes are gone. Now, I like gold for this word. I'm just feeling gold right now, so I'm just going to change it to gold. In my swatches panel, there's a little button that's has your color libraries in it. This is really cool to play around with too. You can choose patterns and all kinds of weird things in here. But I want to color this gold. So I'm going to go down to gradients and then metals, because gold is a metal. And I'm feeling this one today. And because I don't like, right now my gradient is set up to go vertically, just like this. So you see it starts with the really dark color over here. Then it transfers into that brown and then the tan and then the beige, I guess, and then a darker tan and then more of a copper color at the end. Which is cool, but I just don't like the up and down of a gradient, like the 90 degrees. So I always just change it to 45 because that's my preference. And it just kind of, to me, looks a little more realistic. So there's the word that I want to print and cut, but now I want to add a cut line to it. And I'm going to do this two different ways for you. So there is a previous video on my channel that tells you how to actually add a cut line to something. But for this one, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the cut line instead of creating the color and showing all that stuff. You can view the other video if you're not sure how to do that. So I have my cut line saved in my library right here. And I want to select outline, which you can also do up in your color palette. So you can toggle between your fill and your outline. So we want outline. And I'm going to go to my library, select my cut contour. So now you can see I have the cut contour on there, but I don't want it at whatever stroke it's at now, 1 point, because when you make a cut line, it should be at 0.25. Now my cut line's there, but I have no bleed. So I'm going to add bleed, and then I'm going to show you how to do this another way, and then I'll show you how to round the corners of everything. So I'm going to select my shape again, and then I'm going to say Object, Path, and then offset path. So that what offset path means is it's taking whatever you have just drawn, which they call a path, and offsetting it, meaning either make a bigger copy of it or a smaller copy of it. So now you can see this was my original line here, and now they've made a bigger copy at 0.25 because that's the last setting that I had it at. And 0.25 is actually what you want here, 0.25 of an inch, not 0.25 points. So 0.25 of an inch is your standard bleed size. So that's exactly what we want. You don't really need to mess around with these things. I mean, you can just to see what they do, but this is exactly what you need for this. And then if you wanted to, you could toggle your preview on and off and just say, okay. Now, when you do that, it's replicating the fill color and the stroke, the cut line that we have. So you can see now I have two cut lines, and I obviously do not want two cut lines. I just want the one cut line. So I'm selecting my outside shape, and I'm just going to turn that pink line off for that. So this only cuts once. Now, because this is a gradient, the way that it offsets path in Illustrator isn't perfect on gradients. So you can see that like the dark brown here isn't also dark brown here. So the bleed isn't actually perfect. And that's just because of the way the gradient is set up here. So it's still all the same settings as the other one. For example, if I click on this tan color, it's sitting at 38.2 for its location. And that should be true for this inside shape as well, which just let me select. Yeah. So the tan color, again, sitting at 38.2. But just because the shape that we created here, the offset shape, is bigger and wider and taller than this shape, it just starts the colors a little bit in a different spot, if that makes sense. So now what I do at this point, this is kind of a cheat. Just select your inside shape, which now I've, for some reason, messed up and lost my cut line. So I'm going to go add that back in. Okay, so now my cut line is back. And then I'm just going to erase the fill. And then it will cut exactly what I have behind it, and the bleed matches up and all the things. So now I have that shape. Now this tutorial I'm also going to show you one other way to do this, and that is, just going to make that a bit smaller. And then I'm going to option drag this while I made a copy, and I also held shift there. So what that does is if you start dragging and then you hold down shift and option or shift and alt on a PC, that will drag your shape or your object straight. So whether that's straight up and down or straight on a 45-degree angle or straight left or straight down or whatever, it drags it straight. So even if I move my mouse up, now it's at 45 degrees. But I just want it off to the right, so it's just a habit for me to press that shift button. And then I'm going to expand them again. So now let's say I want the inside to be, or the outside to be my cut line, and I just want it to be white. Why is it doing that? One sec. So I'm going to change this to no fill because my background or my media is already white. And then I'm going to add the cut line to the outside at 0.25. And then I'm going to fill the inside with, and I'm just using my eyedropper tool here, which if you hover over any tool, you'll see the keyboard shortcut in brackets. So I don't need to actually select the tool. I just press the letter I. So I have my inside shape selected, and I'm just going to click on our outside shape over here because I just want it to be back to that same color. And it does copy the color, but it doesn't copy this part. So I'm changing that back to 45 degrees. There. So now I have two different stickers that I'm going to print and cut. One is going to cut exactly along the color, and one is going to cut with a white kind of outline to it. So now, to get to the part of the tutorial that we're after here is how to round corners. So as your cutter comes along and is cutting this shape, it might not have too many issues with this one because we have nice rounded corners in here. Where it's going to have some issues is right in here, possibly in this area, and anywhere that your line or your cut line comes to like a sharp point. So up in here as well might be an issue. So all we're doing is we're selecting our shape, and then I'm going to press the letter A, which is the same thing as selecting your direct selection tool. You see how there's the A in brackets? So I'm just pressing A because I prefer keyboard shortcuts. And actually, I'm going to press Z to zoom in first. Then I'm selecting, see these little round things? Those are corner rounders. So if you just grab one and drag it, it will select all the corners. If you can see the other corners in the print, it will select every corner you have that can be rounded, and it'll round it just by dragging your mouse up and down. But that isn't what I want here. I only want to round the ones that I want to round, just to show you how to do it, because there's no real better reason than that. Normally I would just select all, but I want to show you how to do it properly. So I'm going to actually click on the little dot, the little blue and white dot there, and that will highlight it. You see how it's it's like a blue outline with a white circle rather than like a blue and white target. That means only that one is going to be changed. So I'm just going to drag that out and give it just a slightly little, all you're trying to do is get rid of that point so that when your blade comes along, it just smoothly goes over there. So you don't need to drag it all the way out, or you can, depending on the aesthetic. You don't want to ruin the aesthetic and make that now look like a weird, I don't know, W or I or something. So I want to keep making it look like the letter U. So I'm just going to drag a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same over here because I want to round that one out and round that one out. And then just these other, this is actually a pretty cool design in that there aren't a lot of corners that you have to round out, but the ones that are there are probably going to be an issue. So Highly recommend this. I know my cutter does not like corners, especially on laminated decals. It's not so bad on HTV, but on laminated decals where the vinyl plus the lam is a little bit thicker, it definitely doesn't like to have to do that. So I like to go in and just change these ever so slightly so that my cutter has no issues with them. Okay, so now I've done that shape. You don't need to do anything to the outside shape because that's not cutting, just the shape that has the pink outline. Now on this one, it might be easier to just grab all the nodes that are doing that because there are quite a few more when we expanded that path. So now these are not rounded like this one is. So again, I'm just selecting my direct selection tool, selecting the outside. Actually, first I'm going to select my selection tool, which is the letter V. Okay, so now I have that whole thing selected, then select direct selection, and then you get all the little nodes. So I'm just going to grab one and it'll change them all. So now we've rounded out all our corners except maybe some of them that don't have enough room. Like this one, you see I don't get the option to expand it. I can only change that one. So in that case, I would just do it myself because that is for sure going to be a problem area on my decal and it'll probably just rip the vinyl. So the reason why, sorry, I'm just using my Z tool to zoom in here. And the reason why this is a problem is because of that little bugger right there. So all I'm going to do is select that node, zoom out so you can see what happens here. I'm going to select the letter P, which is my pen tool, which is also up in this, nope, not that one, this one. That's your pen tool. The pen tool is for drawing with nodes and adjusting those nodes. So when I hover my pen tool over any little anchor point, you see the little minus sign behind it? That means I'm taking away that anchor point. And do you see how it also changed the shape of that? Which in this case doesn't really matter. It didn't make a huge difference, but sometimes it does. And then you need to go in and grab your direct selection tool and just reshape it a little bit like that. And then once that little node is gone, then you get this back, and now I can round it. Another really cool thing the pen tool does is it'll add nodes. So if you just hover over your stroke, you'll see that it has a plus sign, and then just keep going down. Anywhere there's already a node, you'll get the minus sign. So that's the option to take it out, or the option to add a node in. So say if you wanted to do something funky like that, you could. I don't want to do that though. And then I'm just looking around at all my other corners here and trying to find any spots that might be problems. I predict this will be a problem and probably that too. So I'm just going to zoom way in here because I could almost guarantee, yeah, there's other little nodes that are too close. So again, I'm just grabbing my pen tool, getting rid of that, and then if I need to, select my A tool, my direct selection, reshape it slightly. That's really for perfectionists, though. You don't need to be doing that because we're not changing the shape of this drastically. And then I all of a sudden have my little rounded tools here. And where else are we finding problems with this? This is all looking really good now. Might be a small problem there, but I'm willing to risk that one. It's a wide enough angle that it probably won't be a problem. Where it has the most problems is the tight angles. Like these ones are much tighter angles than that nice wide one. So your blade will come along and just kind of carry on over that. Whereas when your blade comes along here, it has to stop and then change direction. Like that's a very notable stop. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you're selecting which corners to round. That is how you round corners of a vector shape. It is no different than, we've had previous videos on our channel about how to add cut lines to raster shapes. So raster shapes being like an image of someone's head, or a picture that you bought from Etsy, or something that isn't vector. So if you wanted to check out those videos, and then you'll see how to add the cut line, and then you can refer back to this video on how to change the or round out the corners. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit the subscribe button. We are trying to make this channel available to everybody who needs it. These are important videos that people really find valuable, but nobody really knows about them yet because we're a brand new channel. So if you'd like to help us out, please hit the subscribe button, and we'll be back sometime this week with more videos. If you have any requests for specific things that you're having trouble with, whether it's in Illustrator or on the production end of things, don't be afraid to just put in the comments that you would love to know something. Or if you're on the Facebook group called BN20 users, feel free to ask in there too. You'll find me in that group under my personal name, which is Sarah Tucker. But yeah, also comment on the YouTube videos. We love to read them. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.